Boonta Eve. Boonta Eve was a wild blend of Hutt mythology, outlaw celebration, and barely legal sport. Held annually across the Hutt's sphere of influence, Boonta Eve commemorated the end of the Zim Wars more than 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The night before the Third Battle of Vontor, the last battle of the war, the legendary Hutt general, Boonta Hesterlik Sriluur, gave a grand speech to his retainers and favoured slaves, proclaiming that he would rather die than live under the rule of humans like Zim the despot. When Boonta triumphed over Zim and his Chinese empire, the anniversary of that speech became a holiday across Hutt space, a commemoration of the Hutt Empire's greatest victory. On Boonta Eve, the Hutt's slaves would renew their vows of obedience to their masters, and they were traditionally rewarded with a feast and gifts from the Hutts. On many Hutt-controlled worlds, the holiday was also celebrated with racing sports, a tradition said to have started with the Hutts forcing Chinese prisoners to run foot races for the Hutts to bet on. The prisoners who fell behind would be killed, while only the victor would be allowed to live. On Boonta, an ancient Hutt colony named for the legendary general, Boonta Eve was celebrated with swoop racing, while on other planets, such as Tatooine, pod racing was the sport of choice. Before the rise of the Empire, Tatooine hosted the Boonta Eve Classic, a breakneck pod race outside Mos Espa. In Mos Eisley, fireworks lit the sky. In Mos Espa, street vendors sold greasy meats, while locals bet credits they didn't have. Sometimes, gangs known as Boonta Eve bandits used the chaos as cover for muggings. Nothing says festivity like a side of petty crime. For the Hutts, Boonta Eve was a symbol of dominance. For the locals, it was tradition. And for one 9-year-old named Anakin Skywalker, it was destiny. Republic Day. Republic Day was the holiday that once held the galaxy together. At least in theory. Celebrated annually, it marked the founding of the Galactic Republic, a moment that, for millennia, symbolized peace, cooperation, and the shared future of countless worlds. In the core worlds, especially Coruscant, the day was grand. Speeches echoed from the Senate Rotunda, and fireworks danced across the skyline in orchestrated displays. Jedi often stood in quiet attendance, present but not political, a reminder of the Republic's ancient guardianship. Over time, especially in the final decades of the Republic, Republic Day became more ceremonial than sincere, a pageant of optimism wrapped around a crumbling political structure. Still, for many, it was a day to believe in what the Republic was supposed to be. After the rise of the Empire, Republic Day was quietly retired from calendars and replaced by Empire Day, because tyrants don't like anniversaries that remind people of freedom. Empire Day / Remembrance Day. On planets under Imperial control, Empire Day meant fireworks, marches, and a lot of terrified smiling. Officially, it celebrated the formation of the Galactic Empire when Supreme Chancellor Palpatine became Emperor and the Republic was reorganized for a safe and secure society. Unofficially, it was a yearly reminder that resistance was bad for your health. First declared in 19 BBY, the day featured parades of stormtroopers, hollow propaganda loops, and speeches about loyalty, strength, and Imperial unity. It was celebrated annually on the anniversary of the Declaration of a New Order, the speech with which Palpatine formed the Empire. On core worlds like Coruscant, the celebration looked polished, regal even. In the Outer Rim, it was all blasters, banners, and bootlicking. For some, Empire Day was just noise and spectacle. For others, it marked the death of democracy. Saboteurs sometimes used the chaos to stage attacks. After the formation of the Alliance to restore the Republic, the Alliance began promoting their own holiday, Remembrance Day. This holiday was a day of remembrance not just for the Old Republic, but also for all those who had died to see it restored. Remembrance Day was a solemn holiday, a day when the heroes of the rebellion were honored. It was held on the same day as Empire Day and served as a competing holiday, a way for those who aligned with the rebellion to reject the Empire's national celebration. Equinox Day. In canon, Equinox Day on Hosnian Prime marked the official start of autumn and unofficially the prettiest day of the year in the core. It wasn't a military parade or a religious rite. It was a celebration of balance, rhythm, and planetary pride. Each year, citizens packed the street of the capital for sun sail races, elegant, high-speed skimmers that glided through the skyline on solar winds. Of course, after the destruction of Hosnian Prime, Equinox Day became a memory, another tradition turned to stardust. But its memory lived on in old hollows, golden sails, setting suns, and a planet unaware that its end was coming. Festival of Light. On Naboo, history was sacred, and the Festival of Light was among its oldest celebrations. It marked the anniversary of Naboo's entry into the Galactic Republic in 867 BBY, and it honored the planet's place in the wider galaxy. In keeping with Naboo tradition, it reflected the ideals of unity and peace. The festival was observed for centuries in the capital, Theed. During the 847th Festival of Light, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine addressed the crowd in a public ceremony. To outsiders, the Festival of Light was a beautiful holiday. To the Naboo, it was a living reminder of their identity within the Republic. Its continuity across generation, through times of peace and uncertainty alike, made it a cultural anchor, celebrated in some form even during the turbulent final years of the Republic. Ka'ana. Ka'ana was the name of an ancient festival celebrated on the planet Asmeru. The holiday always fell on the 234th day of the 16th month of the Asmeru calendar. Its deeper meanings and traditions are unknown, apart from its impact on one somewhat infamous figure. This was a former bodyguard's daughter from Brental IV, who chose the name Ka'ana as her own. She would later become a notorious pirate in the Greater Saswena, using 23416, the date of the festival, as the code to decide which cargo containers of Lomite ore to steal. All Species Week. Once a year, the towering Ecumenopolis of Coruscant paused its usual bureaucratic grind to celebrate the richness of the galaxy's sentient life. All Species Week honored the diversity of Galactic City's residents, millions of species coexisting in one planet-wide metropolis. Markets lit up with off-world cuisine, public squares echoed with alien music, and cultural exhibitions filled the Senate District. From Dug acrobats to Mon Calamari choirs, it was Coruscant's most vibrant week, both a celebration and a political statement. This galaxy belongs to all of us. But not everyone joined for the fun. During one such celebration, the Urso family used the event's chaos and crowd cover to escape from the Project Celestial Power Complex after Galen Urso discovered his research was being weaponized into what would become the Death Star's super laser. Later, under the Empire's human-centric rule, All Species Week faded from official calendars. It didn't fit the new narrative. In the tyrannical view of the Empire, galactic diversity wasn't a strength, it was a threat. Festival of the Ancestors. In canon, every 42 years, the native Aki of Pasaana held the Festival of the Ancestors, a dazzling celebration that honored the past while looking toward the future. For the Aki, it was sacred. For off-worlders lucky enough to attend, it was unforgettable. The festival flooded the desert with life. Colorful kites soared overhead, crowd dancers rippled through the dunes, and guests were welcomed with flower necklaces and sugared sweets that were famous across the slice. The boldest rituals included the burning of effigies representing ancestors, an act of reverence and joy, not mourning. In 35 ABY, Rey, Finn, Poe, and C-3PO stumbled upon the festival while tracking Ochi of Bestoon. With an estimated 500,000 attendees, including 5,000 off-worlders, the festival was hardly obscure, but it remained deeply rooted in tradition. No sponsorships, no politics, just the Aki celebrating legacy beneath Pasaana's sun. Winter Fete. Winter Fete was a candlelit celebration held across the Tapani sector in the southern core. Originating on Pelagon, it began as a solstice holiday rooted in warmth, reflection, and the turning of seasons. Over time, Winter Fete grew into a week-long sector-wide holiday. As settlers spread from Pelagon to other Tapani worlds, they carried the tradition with them, adapting it to local cultures. Over time, its place on the calendar adjusted to align with Coruscant's Fete Week, blending ancient rites with modern schedules. While rarely flashy, Winter Fete was deeply personal. Families gathered, communities shared meals, and the galaxy, briefly, paused. Even under Imperial rule, the candles kept burning. Quiet traditions, after all, are harder to erase. Tapani Day. Tapani Day was the holiday for remembering the day the Tapani sector was founded, and a perfect excuse for nobles to show off and commoners to get some rest. Celebrated annually between the months of Kelowna and Selona on the Tapani calendar, it honoured the legacy of Shea Tapani, the ancient warlord who united the sector's noble houses and forged one of the core's most enduring political systems. Officially, the day was marked by historical reenactments, public speeches, and ceremonial parades held in key cities across the sector. Each house tried to outdo the others with the size of its banners, the volume of its fanfare, and the sharpness of its dress uniforms. For nobles, Tapani Day was a chance to reinforce a lineage, loyalty, and power. For everyone else, it was a day off work, a street festival, and maybe a chance to drink too much Corellian ale under someone else's family crest. Shelova Week. Shelova Week was a week-long holiday that blended two things Hergliks valued above all else: commerce and family. Originally celebrated in Herglik space, particularly on the Herglik homeworld of Giju, the festival later spread to human populations in the Tapani sector, though humans tended to treat it more like a holiday than a trade ritual. Held between the Tapani months of Helona and Melona, Shelova Week was a time for gift exchanges, negotiations, and business matchmaking, at least in the traditional Herglik version of the holiday. Families met to reconnect, but also to make deals, because for Hergliks, business and bloodlines were inseparable. It wasn't unusual for children to finalize trade agreements under the supervision of their elders, who offered both wisdom and strong opinions. Among non-Hergliks in the Tapani sector, Shelova Week evolved into something simpler: a week off, a few exchanged gifts, and maybe a minor travel boom. Expansion Week. Expansion Week was held each year between the months of Selona and Telona, marking the pause before the aristocratic whirlwind of capital season, when nobles flocked to Pelagon for politics, parties, and plenty of plotting. For noble houses, it was a strategic cooldown. Couriers shuttled invitations, tailors finished custom regalia, and alliances were quietly tested over long lunches. Servants packed wardrobes, scribes prepped talking points. For common citizens, Expansion Week mostly meant travel deals, discounted shipping rates, and a brief reprieve from noble interference. Businesses capitalized in the pre-season calm, and families squeezed in holidays before the nobles clogged the spaceports. Productivity Day. Ironically, Productivity Day mostly involved not working. Held each year between the Tapani months of Nelona and Helona, the holiday began as a commemoration of industrial efficiency across the Tapani sector. It was meant to recognize technological achievement, labor excellence, and high-output economic cycles, complete with awards, factory demonstrations, and the occasional overblown speech from a mid-tier bureaucrat. Over time, the holiday evolved, becoming a sector-wide holiday, a pause from work to recharge, reflect, or pretend to do either. Some traditionalist guilds still marked the occasion with ceremonial tool blessings or performance reviews, but most beings treated it like a long weekend. Independence Week. In the Freeworlds territory of the Tapani sector, Independence Week wasn't about fireworks or speeches, it was about freedom hard won and proudly remembered. Held on the 10th to the 15th of Relona, the week commemorated the Freeworlds' break from the Expanse, the core region of the Tapani sector, dominated by noble houses and aristocratic rule. The Freeworlds were granted independence after war threatened to break out between the noble houses over control of the region, denying direct control to all of them while allowing each house to have economic leverage within the region. Over time, however, the Freeworlds carved out their own political space, becoming more economically powerful than the Expanse itself. Merchant-run, self-governed, and unburdened by the weight of hereditary titles. In a sector dominated by empires and dynasties, the Freeworlds stood apart, and Independence Week was their reminder, loud and clear, of their independence from the Tapani thrones. Harvest Day, Tapani sector. Harvest Day in the Tapani sector was a holiday whose original meaning was entirely unknown, although most suspected it originally had at least something to do with harvesting crops. Originally observed by the sector's early settlers, Harvest Day fell between the months of Yelona and Relona. Communities would gather for local feasts, share surplus goods, and offer simple blessings to agricultural deities or to the Force itself, depending on planetary culture. In rural zones, it was the highlight of the year. In urban centers, it was mostly an excuse for a day off and some extra roasted root cakes. By the time of the Galactic Civil War, the original meaning of the holiday was completely forgotten and Harvest Day became just another day off. The name and the habit stuck. Harvest Day, Tatooine. Harvest Day was also the name of a completely different holiday celebrated on Tatooine. This Harvest Day was less about bounty and more about survival. Celebrated annually in Mos Eisley, the holiday marked the end of the local water harvest season. That meant moisture farms shutting down their collectors for maintenance, junk traders sorting through salvage for resale, and everyone pretending like this year wasn't worse than the last. For Mos Eisley, Harvest Day was a tradition. One day to eat, drink, and pretend the heat, debt, and sand people raids could wait till tomorrow. Carnival Week. It's unknown when exactly the holiday known as Carnival Week started, but during the time of the Empire, it was one of Coruscant's busiest holidays. Coruscant, known as Imperial Center during the Empire's reign, celebrated Carnival Week with a week-long blitz of banners, military marches, and civic joy that looked suspiciously well choreographed. Market districts were draped in red and black, speeches played on loop from every public terminal. The week was designed to reinforce loyalty to the Empire through cultural celebration, mixing subtle fear with spectacle. It was marked with grandiose military parades, orbital firework displays, and the public execution of enemies of the state. Carnival Week was equal parts distraction and declaration, and its intended message to Imperial citizens was simple. The Empire is eternal, benevolent, and watching. That last part was the most prominent of the three, if the public executions didn't already make that clear. Month of Plenty. Among the Weequay of Sriluur, the Month of Plenty wasn't just a season, it was a sacred time devoted to the moon god, Quay. For one lunar cycle, Weequay priests watched the sky through open-roofed temples, tracking Quay's progress across the heavens and interpreting signs from its light. The festival was marked by ritual offerings, harvest rites, and moments of communal silence, punctuated by storytelling, traditional chants, and questions posed to the traditional Quay totems. The temples were designed to allow moonlight to fall directly onto central altars. As the moon waxed and waned, so too did the rhythm of the celebration. For the Weequay, who often served as mercenaries or spaces far from home, the Month of Plenty was a reminder of origin and balance. Even those scattered across the Outer Rim made small observances. Though rarely recognized outside Sriluur, the Month of Plenty was deeply rooted in Weequay identity. Cordel Cove Winter Carnival. Celebrated in Cordel Cove, a settlement tucked into the icy cliffs of Neftali, the Cordel Cove Winter Carnival was a festival that celebrated the planet's frozen beauty and the resilience of the people who called it home. Held annually during Neftali's long sub-zero season, the carnival transformed the otherwise stark city of Cordel Cove into a wonderland. Traditional swoop races were held in the planet's ice caverns, and beverages were made from Neftalian pure ice water. The festival blended frontier pride with aesthetic flair. Artists carved towering sculptures from glacial blocks hauled in from the outer ice fields, while children raced sleds down artificially steepened alleyways. Though largely unknown outside the southern Outer Rim, the Winter Carnival became a regional draw, offering a rare dose of warmth, community, and joy in an otherwise unforgiving environment. Life Day. Life Day was an ancient Wookiee tradition dating back to long before the Wookiees first made contact with the outside galaxy. It served two primary purposes. The first was to honor life in all its forms, the diverse ecosystem of Kashyyyk, while the second was to honor one's family specifically, to remember those who had died and celebrate the youngest members of the family who brought new life even as older generations died off. Put another way, Life Day was a celebration of life, with special attention paid to life cycles, interconnected nature, and the compassion that nurtured and strengthened those connections. Life Day was originally celebrated once every 3 years, with celebrations lasting for up to 2 weeks, but as it became more popular across the galaxy, Life Day started to be celebrated on an annual basis. It was the Wookiees' most sacred holiday, and Wookiees who were away from Kashyyyk usually made an effort to travel back home for it so as to celebrate the holiday on Kashyyyk with their relatives. On the day itself, the Wookiees would don ceremonial red robes and make a pilgrimage to the base of the Tree of Life, a roshir that legend claimed was the original point of all life on Kashyyyk and the place where Wookiee culture began. The Wookiees would gather at the Tree of Life, bearing Life Day orbs, glass-like spheres that bore the image of a field of stars. These sacred orbs were a representation of the afterlife, as the Wookiees believed that the souls of their deceased walked off into the stars when they died, journeying to the place beyond the Shadowlands where grief and darkness could not touch them. These were used as icons during prayer services to remember the dead. The Life Day ceremony also involved expressions of gratitude for the web of life and all its blessings, as well as song and, of course, feasting. Members of Wookiees' honor families were also invited to Kashyyyk for participation in Life Day ceremonies, as Life Day was also a reflection on life debts and the importance of acts of compassion. Of course, Wookiees weren't always able to make it back to Kashyyyk for Life Day for one reason or another. Those who couldn't would get together with as many relatives, members of their honor families, and or fellow Wookiees as they could and carry out a simplified version of the traditional Life Day ceremony, which was basically just a simple prayer service. Originally, Life Day was a solemn, spiritual holiday deeply entrenched in Wookiee culture, celebrated by the Wookiees alone. But in the later millennia of Republic history, as the Wookiees became participants in galactic civilization and their cultural traditions became more widely known, Life Day became popular with non-Wookiees as well. By the time of the Cold War between the Republic and the true Sith Empire, Life Day was celebrated galaxy-wide, not only in the Republic, but in Hutt space and even the Sith Empire as well. The Jedi Order had begun annually decorating the Jedi Temple for Life Day by the time of the Clone Wars, as had many other institutions across the galaxy. Of course, as Life Day became a more widely celebrated holiday, the way it was celebrated changed greatly, at least among non-Wookiees. While the Wookiees continued to celebrate Life Day as they always had, the rest of the galaxy steadily made the holiday into a time of general-purpose revelry. Commercial interests even got involved, and despite Life Day originally being a quiet holiday based in the Wookiee religion, which strongly rejected materialism and greed, the holiday was steadily commercialized by the greater galaxy, becoming a day of gift-giving as well as a celebration of life and family. What the Wookiees thought of this desecration is unknown, but at the very least, they themselves resisted this influence. During the reign of the Empire, Kashyyyk came under occupation and the Wookiees were enslaved, disrupting traditional Life Day celebrations. Despite this, and despite the Emperor's extreme personal hatred for the holiday, Life Day actually grew more important in Wookiee culture during the Imperial period. With so many Wookiees having been stolen from Kashyyyk, those left on the planet found it all the more important to celebrate what family they still had. Those free Wookiees away from home considered it much more important to return home and be with their families to show solidarity, to the point where they ran Imperial blockades of Kashyyyk just to be home for the holidays. Wookiees in slavery, meanwhile, celebrated Life Day in remembrance of home, gathering with other Wookiees or trusted individuals to perform the traditional ceremony. But anyways guys, that's it for celebrations in the Star Wars universe. Make sure you let us know what your favorite celebration is in the comments section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.